want you to hit me as hard as you can.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Forget it. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. The Last Jedi is the best film in the Star Wars saga. I'm Alex Mady, and welcome to the Unpopular Opinion. Hindsight is always 2020. There was a time when it felt like the original trilogy was considered the most hallowed and perfect three-film franchise ever conceived. Children of the 1970s and 80s grew up with a trio of films that told a beginning, middle, and end. For almost 20 years, those fans had no cinematic follow-ups to George Lucas's creation, and had to rely on a multitude of novels, comics, toys, and video games to satiate their desire for more adventures in a galaxy far, far away. To that note, there are still so many works in that library of materials that are not just bad, but are downright terrible. Still, some Star Wars is better than no Star Wars, and fans rejoiced when the prequels were announced. And yet, when The Phantom Menace hit screens in 1999, there was a vocal segment of Star Wars fans who decried that the franchise they loved was not exactly the same as the original trilogy. Despite record-breaking box office for the new films, these fans forced George Lucas into reconsidering any further movies after he concluded the new trilogy with Revenge of the Sith. Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm and the release of new Star Wars movies aimed to recapture the magic of the original trilogy. You would think that traditionalists would have been silenced. With The Rise of Skywalker hitting theaters and The Mandalorian finally uniting fans of the franchise, we are in a world where the vitriol of a vocal minority of fans are still ripping apart Rian Johnson's sequel for going against the narrative direction they anticipated. These same individuals hiding behind their keyboards and the internet's shroud of anonymity are disgustingly attacking people like Kelly Marie Tran just because they disliked her character. Much like how fans trashed Ahmed Best for playing Jar Jar Binks, these trolls cannot seem to distinguish reality from fiction. There is no way that a movie can have such a scarring impact on the psyche of an individual unless that person is so weak of constitution that a piece of entertainment can ruin their life. I will admit to holding Star Wars The Last Jedi in lower regard the first time I watched it. I was not angry at the decision that Rian Johnson made, but I felt challenged by them. Some, like the entire Canto Bight sequence, rubbed me the wrong way. I decided that the movie was a disappointment. It did invite scrutiny and debate, so I watched it again. And then I watched it again. I have now seen it so many times and replayed the more controversial aspects of the movie that I am comfortable in making this statement. Star Wars The Last Jedi is the best film in the entire Star Wars saga. The Last Jedi is a brilliant juxtaposition of the formula we have come to love about George Lucas's saga, combined with expectation-defying narrative decisions. Basing the film in an overall structure that mimics The Empire Strikes Back, as in the main characters are split up, the villains get the upper hand, the main character goes off on their own to train with a mysterious Jedi Master, the leader of the villainous organization is revealed after being a hologram in the first episode, the rogue pilot begins to learn how to be a leader, a debonair criminal betrays the heroes, etc. Rian Johnson takes elements we expected to turn out one way and throws them for a loop. Kylo Ren turns on Snoke but then turns back to the dark side. Luke Skywalker shows up to save the day but ends up dying. DJ, played by Benicio del Toro, betrays the heroes and we wait for him to double back, but he never does. Rey's parents end up being inconsequential. All of these decisions riled up fans in such a way, and yet they are absolutely brilliant choices by Johnson. I will not address the racial or gender-based complaints about the series because, well, they're frickin' stupid. If anyone has a problem with minorities cast in a tale about a diverse universe of alien beings, they are beyond convincing about anything. What I will discuss are some key choices in Star Wars The Last Jedi that are more profound than they may appear at first glance. When I first watched it, I found the entire Canto Bight sequence to be pointless. It felt like it existed simply to give Rose and Finn something to do while all of the other characters were locked in major arcs. Even the design of the casino and characters seemed like something out of the prequels rather than the more reverent style of The Force Awakens. But after examining the sequence, it has become one of my favorites in the entire movie. In fact, the subplot involving Canto Bight is vital to Rian Johnson's tale. Going back to George Lucas's 1977 original, Star Wars has long been about how the sprawling war between the Empire and the Rebellion and how it impacts the universe indirectly. Both Anakin and Luke Skywalker start their stories outside of the war, and we see how their lives are changed by the fight between the light and the dark, good and evil. In The Empire Strikes Back, Cloud City is representative of how a society can operate outside of the grasp of either the Empire or the Rebellion, before Lando Calrissian is forced to choose a side and doubles back on that decision. Here, Canto Bight flips that conceit by showing us the disparate conditions of the rich and poor in Canto Bight. The rich profiting off of selling weapons to both sides, according to DJ, and the poor subjugated by the wide economic gap between them and their masters, shows that while the stakes being waged between the First Order and the Resistance are great, they often fall on deaf ears as the universe chugs along despite their conflict. It is a dark and ominous thought, but one that Johnson punctuates with the closing scene showing one of the slave children emulating Luke Skywalker and looking towards the sky, aiming for a future that seems more tangible than it did before. There is also the case of DJ, whom I originally found to be a pointless character. After taking the place of the Master Codebreaker played by Justin Theroux, DJ joins Finn and Rose to help them stop the First Order. On their journey back to the Resistance caravan, DJ explains to Finn about the aforementioned duplicity of war and who profits off of whom. He also goes from a scoundrel who takes Rose's precious necklace to a decent guy when he returns it after using it to gain access on the First Order ship. Then he quickly flips back when he turns on his compatriots in exchange for money and free passage from the ship. The first time I watched the movie, I kept expecting DJ to, like Lando before him, turn into a hero once again and save the day. Instead, he remains aligned to his belief that it was just business. For a while, I was holding on to seeing Benicio del Toro return for Episode 9, but now I realize that he served his purpose twofold. On one hand, DJ represents the same message that Rian Johnson was conveying about Canto Bight, that the nature of war is more than two-sided. If Johnson had decided to have DJ be inside that walker instead of BB-8, something I was willing to wager on the first time I watched the film, it would have felt hollow and too on the nose. By having DJ serve his purpose and leave the narrative, much like the Master Codebreaker himself, Rian Johnson has upended expectations beautifully. Lastly, there is the decision to reveal that Rey's parents were nobodies. I was disappointed when I first saw Star Wars The Last Jedi, but only because of how much investment I had made discussing and arguing about who her parents would be. Very much like how I used to theorize and discuss the Matrix sequels or television series like Lost and The X-Files, some of my theories panned out while others were wholly unexpected. There was no way Rian Johnson could have satisfied all fans with the decision he made. Many of you, and me for a time, have thought that J.J. Abrams will reverse Johnson's choice of Rey's lineage. If anything, I applaud Rian Johnson for forcing J.J. Abrams and the creative team on The Rise of Skywalker to find a solution that makes sense to either change what was revealed in The Last Jedi or double down and make it all the more interesting. This also flies in the face of the long tradition of heroes coming from meager roots only to discover their royal or magical lineage. But this isn't Harry Potter, this is Star Wars. This pairs perfectly with the ongoing theme of uprising throughout The Last Jedi and gives even more weight to that closing shot of the slave boy looking to the heavens. Rian Johnson had the hardest job of the new trilogy. J.J. Abrams paid homage heavily to what came before to wipe the prequels out of the memories of hesitant fans. The Force Awakens was a summary of what came before, whereas The Last Jedi is a bridge to what comes next. Abrams set the table, but Johnson served the meal. Now, The Rise of Skywalker has to clean it all up. The Last Jedi is no mere entry in a franchise, but rather a cinematic exploration of heavy themes that few filmmakers could have accomplished under the restrictions of Lucasfilm or Disney. Both Rogue One and Solo were helmed by talented directors, but were guided by executives and studio-friendly filmmakers behind the scenes. While The Force Awakens bears J.J. Abrams' trademarks, it never feels unlike a Star Wars movie. That is the greatest success of Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi. It feels at once perfectly at home within the canon started by George Lucas, but also works completely as an independent work of art. For that alone, I consider this the best Star Wars film of the 10 that have been released thus far. Warts and all, Star Wars The Last Jedi manages to play by the rules while also breaking virtually every single one of them. But hey, that's just my unpopular opinion. Tell us yours in the comments below. I'm Alex Mady with JoBlo.com.